What's going on, everybody? This is episode 2 of the Empty Stool podcast. Where did the first one go? YouTube, I don't know. It just...
Purgatory.
The lack of a technical term is hating on us and not letting us process our videos. So we're either going to try it again, or you may be seeing this video after UFC 253, depending on what the hell happened. But this is my co-host, Rupert Sanchez over here. What's going on, man?
Good, man. How are you?
Good to see you with the Kimbo beard.
I know, the quarantine beard. I'm ready for it to come off, though, for real.
Well, UFC 249, the first live event, it was pay-per-view, just happened May 9th, which was Saturday, which was 2 days ago. And it was, for all intents and purposes, a success, an interesting watch. You were able to literally hear everything in the crowd. It was funny, even just hearing talking about the main event. Justin Gaethje, was after the second round where he got rocked by Tony Ferguson. I thought the funniest part of that clip on Twitter that they shared, at least he goes back to the corner, he's telling us, whoever's putting water in his mouth, what the hell are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. So there's a lot of stuff going on. A couple highlights before we dive into it. Hardy, after his fight, he was getting interviewed by Joe Rogan, basically attributed to the lack of an audience as a reason why he won, because he said he was able to hear Daniel Cormier, as he was announcing the fight, point out pointers and what the heck he was doing wrong. So he gave him a shout out afterwards, say, hey, thank you very much, and your tips helped me. Which I thought was hilarious. You can just hear everything, every shot, every comment, people yelling after the match. So it's funny. You get to hear. You feel like you were there. You feel like you were actually at the event. Joe Rogan's even having fun after he introduced the fighters to the crowd. After he leaves, there's no one there. Dana White, the press conference afterwards, said the attendance was 0. It said so. It was the ongoing joke at the arena. But talk to me just about the overall impression, of the event. Not at an audience. What did you think about that before we dive into the main event?
Yeah, I mean, the event itself, like the no audience, pandemic kind of style of it, I'd already seen it in Brasilia, so it wasn't that kind of new to me. I'd already seen it play out once before, and I knew there was going to be some guys that are going to play to the crowd, and they were going to, you know what I mean, like trying to make fun of the situation. But I feel like this was even quieter than Brasilia. Like, I need to watch Brasilia again. The fight night that happened right before everything shut down. I want to say that this felt quieter. So I don't know if there was like less people or why, or maybe the sound was just picking up more. I have no idea, but it definitely you could hear more of the cornermen talking, and you could even pick up like, Joe Rogan, like not only when they're talking, but like the echo, you know what I mean? Almost. But yeah, as far as the event, the production was really good. As always, the production value for the UFC has gone up since they did the deal with ESPN. They do the cool like shot with Megan O'Leary, and then as the fighters walking out, I think that's really cool. And as far as the event, it's more the same as Brasilia, was right before the pandemic.
Predictions going in, particularly, talking about the main event, Tony Ferguson, Justin Gaethje. Justin Gaethje made it a point that if he didn't get Ferguson out there in 8 to 12 minutes or 10 to 12 minutes, that he's probably going to be in trouble. Obviously, wasn't the case. 5th round stoppage. You think that was a little gamesmanship on his part, or is that just, I hate the cliche, but the way the cookie crumbled?
Yeah, no, I think he really meant it, because I believed it. I thought that and just about anybody in MMA, in the MMA world, thought that if he didn't get him out of there between 8 to 12 minutes, 12 being the very max, that Ferguson would take over, and that would be all she wrote for him. Eventually, he would crumble. But for me, what happened that was it's been like an ongoing evolution of Justin Gaethje. Ever since the Dustin Poirier fight that he lost, he got out of there. He put him out of there in the 3rd round, I want to say, 3rd or 4th. Ever since then, he's been more measured and more calculating. And we haven't really seen it because he knocks the guys out in the 1st round, Cowboy, James Vick, and Edson Barboza. But in this fight, we really saw him, after he got hurt in the 2nd round, talked to Trevor Whitman, his coach, and they were very adamant about staying focused. He's like, take 10% off your punches, and whenever you see it there, put it all, put everything into the punch. But if it's mostly, try to dial it back a little bit and just stay. He throws a punch, you throw two, and that's what he did. And it's very impressive how focused he stayed in that fight. And I thought in the third round he was starting to slow down, and I was like, here we go. Ferguson's gonna take over and drown him, like as they say. And he didn't. He caught a second wind, and every time Ferguson threw a punch, he threw two or three, and he was just never really there for Ferguson. Like if you look at Justin Gaethje after the fight, he has some bumps and bruises, but nothing like the other fighters that fight Tony Ferguson looked like. I mean, Tony Ferguson looked like he fought Tony Ferguson after the fight. Like that's what he looked like, So it was a very impressive performance, the best performance of his career by far.
Yeah, Ferguson said, he's going to go in there, win or lose, come out a winner. I think he, he certainly did. I mean, he showed a lot of heart. But Gaethje, what do you think? Will Gaethje get that fight with Khabib after this? What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, that's the fight to make, is the unification bout for the lightweight title against Khabib. But, there's this Irish superstar that's been talking a lot. Yeah. And if he can convince... Now, here's the caveat to that. Dana White doesn't seem too inclined on booking a Conor McGregor fight with an empty arena. But there's no telling when they're going to allow fans back, in the buildings like that. So I don't think he's also game to just wait it out, So that's the small caveat to that. But I think Gaethje takes that fight. If it's offered to him, and I'm sure the money's going to be right, and it's a huge feather in his cap if he's able to beat Conor McGregor, I think he takes that fight. So normally, if you would have asked me this right after the fight, I would have said yes, no question about it. Khabib, Justin Gaethje for the title, unification, that's going to happen. But then McGregor started talking, and he'd already been showing signs of wanting to fight no matter what. So that makes a lot of sense to me, especially if Khabib is not going to be ready till the end of summer, early fall. I mean, he did say July, but I don't know. I don't know if that was just gamemanship on his part. If you read, because he hasn't fought in the summer in years. I don't remember the last time Khabib fought in July or August. He's always fighting in, because of Ramadan, he's fighting in September, October, November, that time frame. So yeah, McGregor's the X factor. If he calls Dana White and says, "I want to fight Justin Gaethje," and I think that fight happens. Because I don't think Justin Gaethje thinks he can lose. That's the thing. I'm sure that Justin Gaethje thinks that he can beat McGregor. So I think that's why I think he would consider it.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting point to bring up, and I want to credit essentiallysports.com writer Ruben Coutinho for his the citation here. UFC 249 sold more than double already, says Dana White. A lot of pre-purchases leading up to it, in spite of the economy, in spite of COVID. So I think he might want to wait to see what the official numbers are after the fact and see, maybe McGregor would be an excellent event to have on a card, in spite of the fact, that they're going to be an empty arena. Who the hell knows? But judging by his press conference, it seemed like the Gaethje Khabib route would be, essentially the way to go. And, at least the fans are kind of clamoring for a Ferguson-Conor fight, just from an action standpoint. But anyway, those are the stories about the main event card. I want to talk to you a little bit about the Cejudo and Cruz, because it was a pretty interesting storyline. So, well, first off, give me a recap of the fight. What do you think about it? And I'll talk about the post-fight drama a little bit.
Yeah, I thought the fight was interesting because it never felt like it really got going. You know what I mean? Like, there was a lot of leg kicks on the part of Cejudo. He very smart. Dom Cruz has had a lot of... Well, first of all, his movement is this number one, his best attribute, and then also he's had a lot of injuries on his legs. So Cejudo started chopping him, but the distance was very evident early on that it was a very long distance for Cejudo to close, and so he went for a couple takedowns, didn't land them. He and Cruz was the bigger man. It was all of that was very obvious, and all of the things that we kind of pointed out before the fight that we thought were gonna come in play, but Cejudo he confused Dom too. You know, he wasn't a stationary target. He was moving around. He was darting in and out, protecting himself. And the first round was kind of iffy. Like, who do you give it to? But I gave the edge to Cejudo. And then in the second round, Cejudo started doing better and opening up a little bit more and feeling Dom Cruz's movement a little bit better. And then there was a headbutt, right? And it's funny, my friend kept telling me, he's like, they're going to headbutt each other because they were both closing the distance, leading with their head. And I was like, you know, when it happened, I was like, oh, like you predicted it or whatever. But then 10 seconds later, the exact same thing happens, but this time Cejudo was waiting with the knee. And I thought that was very impressive because it was such a quick turnaround from the headbutt to the knee, where Cejudo made that adjustment. He's like, he's leading with his head. I'm gonna anticipate that and land the knee. Obviously the stoppage is controversial. I personally feel that in the moment I felt that Cruz was getting up, even though he was eating a lot of shots. He was coherent, he was conscious, he was not defending himself, but he was aware of the situation, trying to get himself in a position to defend himself. It was just that Cejudo's a really good swarmer. He did the same thing to TJ Dillashaw. He's really good about when he hurts you, not giving you an inch. You know, he jumps right on top of you, and he's really making you work to get back up. You know, it's tough when the fight gets stopped and the guy that got stopped looks like there's nothing wrong with him. You know, It's really hard to see that. And so from the Dominic Cruz standpoint, I get it. Watching the replay, he took 11 unanswered shots. That's tough from the referee's perspective to see that and not want to stop the fight.
You know, 3 people start, especially like just in boxing, 3, they start to kind of get their antennas up. You know? But you know, after the fight, Cruz had an interesting interview, according to an article, MMAmania.com, courtesy of Ryan Harkness. He was on the ESPN post-fight show and was being interviewed by Megan Olive. And Megan Olive asked him, did you feel like you were totally cognizant in getting to your feet at that moment? To which he replied, totally cognizant? It's hard to say. You're rocked. Sometimes you get hit, you know, in those positions many, many times. And I had seconds in the round, and I just think that sometimes I wish there was a way to keep these refs a bit more responsive. Guy, referring to the ref, guy smelled like alcohol and cigarettes, so who knows what he was doing. I wish we drug tested them. Jesus. I know Herb Dean is good. He's one of the best refs. I immediately, when I saw that ref, was like, man, is there a way to veto a ref and get a new one? I wonder, as fighters, do we even have that choice? I mean, what do you kind of take away from that? You think it was sour grapes, or what's the deal?
It's hard because Cruz is never a sore loser. You know what I mean? Like he went in there against Cody Garbrandt with his feet completely shot. You know, he had shin splints and all these bad injuries, and he shook, you know, Cody Garbrandt's hand and was very, very respectful and very, you know, so he's always a class act. So it's hard for me to hear him say these things because it comes across as sour grapes. It comes across as him being a sore loser. And that's just not who he is, at least from the last, you know, his 20 fights before that I've seen his whole career, you know. So it's hard for me to hear him say these things because it does come across that way. I do agree that referees, just like in the other sports, they need to be held more accountable. I think you have not even had this conversation about, you know, there's been so many times where a referee in any sport has made a huge mistake in a big game, you know? And I think that the sports leagues around in the United States, they end up protecting these referees. And it's kind of taboo to talk about them. But I don't know. I think especially in a sport like MMA where, you know, your career could completely derail with one loss. Like if you lose a game in the middle of the season in baseball, nobody cares. But if you lose one fight, I mean, you only have so many of those before you're cut from the UFC, you know? And so I think it's I do agree with him that referees should be held more accountable, you know, but at the same time, the way it's coming across as if he's, you know, said sour grapes, like you said.
The referee in question was Keith Peterson.
Yeah.
I got to kind of maybe push back slightly and say that I think maybe the refs don't get as much attention in boxing and MMA so much because I think the judging is more, especially in boxing, deserving of the oversight or some sort of shakeup, because everything you just said about, you know, people, their careers getting derailed, a lot of that comes down to the judging with these wild decisions. And it's funny, especially more so in boxing, how it's just become part of the culture. Third fight up on the docket, Francis Ngannou and your dark horse, Rosenstruck.
Oh man.
Listen, that's the beauty about this sport is stuff happens just like that. Ngannou, it was 20 seconds and he got his win, and it was very impressive. What did you think of it?
Yeah, Rosenstruck was my dark horse. I felt that his kickboxing background would come into play. He would be able to keep Ngannou at kicking range, circle away, and kind of pick his spots to engage with Ngannou. And it looked like in the beginning of the fight that was the game plan. And then immediately as Ngannou blitzed forward, instead of circling away, he backed up straight back. And that's a terrible, terrible mistake to make against a power puncher. You know, so you end up with your feet, you know, right next to each other and your chin on a platter, you know, and that's exactly what happened. Ngannou swung 3-4 times, finally connected, and that was all she wrote. You know, Ngannou hits people, they drop. I've never seen Ngannou hit someone cleanly and not knock them out. You know, he just has freakish power, and he just puts everything into his punches as well. Ngannou looked great. I think next up for him is a title. He's beat everybody in the heavyweight division that there is to beat. He's one of the few. He's another Tony Ferguson. By the time he gets to the title shot, he would have already beat everyone in the top 10. So if I was his manager, I would tell him, chill. Like, go work on your craft. Go work on wrestling, because it doesn't matter who he fights. If he fights DC or Stipe, either one of those two guys is going to wrestle him. He needs to work on his takedown defense and keeping the fight at range. So that's what I would do for the next 6 months, and then start training camp for the winner of DC Stipe.
Yeah, so that's 4 straight first-round knockouts for Ngannou, and according to an article on CBSSports.com, courtesy of Brent Brookhouse, Ngannou expresses frustration. He says, quote, "I don't know what it takes to have a title shot in the UFC. To be honest, I made my peace with it. It's not that I don't care. I don't want to have feelings like it's something that can control me. When I chase the knockout, it doesn't work, so I don't chase anymore. When he called me out, I'm like, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. He just came here and had a few knockouts, but I didn't see anything impressive. But I don't mind people calling me out," in reference to his fight with Rosenstruck. So, yeah, where do you think Rosenstruck goes from here?
I mean, he was on a roll before. I mean, obviously undefeated, 10-0. I'm sorry?
He was 10-0, yeah.
Yeah, he was 10-0. I say a top 5. I don't think he has to go down to the bottom of the barrel. I think if he can get in there with Junior Dos Santos or Volkov, either one of those guys, you know, gets him right back in the thick of it. But heavyweight has been inactive recently in the last year and a half, 2 years, because it was DC and Stipe, and those guys have been hurt a lot. So I think once that picture clears up, like say for instance, if Stipe fights Francis for the title and Francis beats him, I think now we're gonna start seeing movement in that division where Francis would be defending the belt, because Francis has never been hurt. You know, he's been ready. He's answered the bell every time. So there's no indication that he would be less active as a champion. So if I'm a heavyweight contender, that's what I'm hoping for. I mean, it's a double-edged sword because you hope for Francis to win so he could defend the belt, but then you have to fight Francis Ngannou, So, but yeah, Rosenstruck, I think he gets a Volkov or Dos Santos, and if he wins that fight, then he's right back in the thick of it. And you just gotta wait it out and see what happens at the top of the division.
30 seconds or less. Calvin Kattar defeats Jeremy Stevens, second round knockout via elbow. What were your thoughts on that fight?
So Calvin Kattar is to me, he's a emerging superstar. His last fight, he lost to Sabit, who is everyone's pick for the next champion at 145. But if that fight would have been a 5-round fight, he would have won that. He was taking over that fight, going in at the end of the second round a little bit, but then all of the third round he was just like taking off. And then you got to think that there's a reason why the Sabit camp refused to make it a 5-round fight. That has to be the first main event of a card that I've seen that hasn't been a 5-round fight, and I kind of was confused by that. When they said, "Oh, it's a 3-round fight," I didn't understand why, and it was because they didn't want to do it. The Sabit camp didn't want to do it, so he agreed to it, and they fought, and so that's 2 fights in a row. He's 1-1 in the last 2 fights, but you have to believe that he has stock raised in the loss to Sabit, and now he destroyed a top 10 featherweight. Which. I don't remember if he's been Stevens, if he's been stopped via head strikes in his last fights, 10, 15 fights. I think it's mostly been decisions or that one liver shot with a body kick that Aldo landed on him a couple fights ago. So he's durable, tough, and Kattar. I mean, that elbow was vicious, man, vicious, and he made it look easy. So I think Kattar gets a top 5 guy next. Hopefully Mexico's own Yair Rodriguez. That would be a crazy fight. It's the top of the division is kind of murky there because Brian Ortega was hurt. He was supposed to fight the Korean Zombie. We'll see what happens with that fight. Max Holloway, I'm sure he's itching to get right back in there. Who would they give him? They were saying a rematch with Volkanovski out of respect for Max Holloway being, the second greatest featherweight champion of all time. So they said give him an immediate rematch. But that fight got pushed, and Volkanovski expressed disinterest in fighting during the pandemic. So if he's not going to fight, are they going to make an interim title? And who would be the 2 contenders for that? Probably, if I was a betting man, if they did that, it would be Zabit and Max Holloway. And they just basically just kind of clearing the division needs to clear itself out, and see what happens. But Kattar is right in the thick of it, man. He's the toughest now. He's very, very sharp. He fights very much like a boxer, like a traditional boxer. Everything is tight up the middle. He understands distance really well. He was very impressive, very, very impressive against a very, very game Jeremy Stevens. Jeremy Stevens was ready. He was looking good. You could have gave him the first round. And nobody would have, complained about it. But Kattar he's just too good, man. He's too good, too young, and I think he in the right matchup he could be a champion. So yeah, I think I was very impressed with that fight.
Clearly, because that was a lot longer than 30 seconds. Now, Greg Hardy, former Carolina Panthers and Cowboys defensive end, defeats Jorgen De Castro via unanimous decision. Essentially was a shutout, 30 to 27 scores on all judges. What were your impressions there?
Yeah, it's funny. I always watch Hardy, and I never can tell if he's gonna be like really good. You know what I mean? Like I watch him, and I'm like, athleticism wise, he 100% belongs. He's one of the more athletic heavyweights. I mean, he is the most athletic heavyweight, maybe I have to think, but and he has good power in his hands, but he just doesn't seem to put it out. He's a counterpuncher, and he literally waits for his opponent to punch. You know what I mean? Like he desperately needs to set traps. and he doesn't. He just kind of lets his opponent. He kind of tries to like feint to get his opponent to engage, but he doesn't commit to it at all. Like he doesn't have any forward offense. And so
I think a lot of that has to do with, he just started. What was his first his debut, MMA debut as an amateur was just in 2017. So
yeah, 17. Yeah, that sounds right.
I think he recognizes that. I'm going up against a guy who's got 20 plus odd years extra muscle memory. So
yeah.
He's extra cautious because of that.
Yeah, that could be it. Yeah, I mean, definitely for sure, the lack of experience plays a huge part in it. I mean, he is in a good team. He has a good team around him. American Top Team is one of the best gyms in the world. So it's just so weird because he doesn't, sometimes I see fighters like a Calvin Kattar, right? And every time I see him fight, he's better. Every time. Or who's another good example? On this card, Justin Gaethje, right? He's been getting better ever since he got to the UFC. Every fight, he's getting better. Hardy, he looks the same to me. You know what I mean? He looks the exact same that he did when I first saw him. He's gonna walk forward, wait for you to punch at him, and then he's gonna throw a punch. He doesn't really have much of a kicking game. I wish he did because he has powerful legs. Being a defensive lineman, a former defensive lineman. So I wish he did kick. But yeah, so hopefully you're right. Hopefully it's going to be experience, and they keep giving him these like marginal top 15 guys until he's ready to take on a top 10 guy. Because we saw when he did take on Volkov, who was a legit top 5. Volkov won every round in that fight.
All right, and we're just going to have to wrap it up there. Anthony Pettis defeated Cowboy Cerrone via decision. 29-28 seemed to be the unanimous decision on all scorecards. 10 seconds or less. Do you agree or disagree?
I disagree. Disagree 100%. I don't see a world where Anthony Pettis won the first 10 rounds. I mean, the first 2 rounds. I had it 10. I had it 20, 26. You know what I mean? 2 10-9 rounds. The first 2 rounds, and very easily. I thought Cowboy did more. Was landing more, and he landed the takedowns. That's one of the things that kind of frustrates me with MMA judging is that they can't decide if takedowns matter more or less. I feel like it changes every fight. Like some fights, you'll have like Dominic Reyes against John Jones, where the takedowns were the difference, and in other fights, like Cowboy versus Pettis, takedowns don't matter apparently. So yeah. So no, I disagree. I love Pettis. Obviously, he's a Hall of Famer. I love to see him fight, but I think Cowboy won that fight. So it'd be interesting to see what they do with both of those guys in their next time out. I'm guessing they both get a top 10 guy.
All right. Well, there you have it. It's Rupert Sanchez, Michael Tula here. This is Empty Stool Podcast, episode 2. I don't know when you guys are going to be seeing these, but these will all be up eventually. So YouTube is just giving us a hard time. Again, it's BTP Sports, KCAA Radio, 102.3 FM. We are out.